The following program is a production of Pioneer Public Television.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Compass, a new program from Pioneer Public Television. This week on Compass, we're going to take a look at broadband. Many people wonder, what is broadband, what's happening, and what does it mean for the rural communities of western Minnesota, the eastern Dakotas, and northwestern Iowa. Here's a look at broadband from Pioneer's Laura K. Prosser.
Nowadays, it's almost impossible to live your daily life without broadband touching it in some way, shape, or form. To pay your bills, to work, from your home, or check your child's class schedule or grades, everything. It's just become so ingrained within our daily life that it's actually become a necessity, very similar to electricity and water.
Not many know really what broadband is. Due to this, MVTV Wireless has made it its mission to reach those unserved and underserved communities in Minnesota.
The simple definition is it's internet access that you pull up your computer and it's there. It is on different types of technology. Our network, or our footprint, covers all of southwest Minnesota. There's only a few small pockets of communities that we're not able to reach with our existing access points, and we're always looking for new communities to reach out to and partner with.
This outreach led them to a partnership with Nobles County, but more specifically with NEON, the Nobles Economic Opportunity Network. NEON is a group that looks at the economy of a region and attempts to help the town grow and keep up with it.
NEON actually kind of took the lead. NEON is a relatively new group of all the governmental agencies across the county, so townships, cities, school district, included with the county. And the group got together and tried to figure out what can we do for the entire community. And the lack of broadband around the community became the #1 priority. So we formed a subcommittee, and the subcommittee actually wrote a grant to Blandin, and the grant was accepted by Blandin. We became a Blandin broadband community, and with that becomes responsibility to try and make a difference.
Becoming a Blandin broadband community meant MVTV had to match the $9,500 grant for Nobles County, and in doing so, the 9-Town Hotspot Project was born.
When Nobles County was approved for the Blandin grant, it was just kind of a no-brainer for us to get involved, and MVTV as a partner is donating our time, our labor, the network itself, and then also 2 years of service.
The Nobles County model included the 9 towns of Bigelow, Dundee, Ellsworth, Leota, Redding, Rushmore, Seward Township, Wilmot, and Little Rock Ransom. These towns were selected for their broadband needs, but also because of their gathering places.
Blandin was able to identify the need and help us to ask those tough questions. Well, okay, if you want broadband adoption, what's the first step? And we actually had our field engineer come out and do a serviceability check, and through some very creative networking, we were able to deliver the service to the locations that NEON needed them in.
So, how do these hotspots work?
It's super easy and it's free. It's as simple as going to the location where you'll be able to identify the location by a sign, the vicinity in which the hotspot will work, and You would simply pick it up in your networking tray. It would bring up a login screen, enter some very basic information. You'd be assigned a user ID and password, and that user ID and password, it will work on any of the 9 hotspots.
Relieving fears for town residents and helping them access the outside world, Nobles County hopes for the project's success and continued adaptation as these towns and their technology grows.
It's definitely been a benefit to both Nobles County and MVTV Wireless because it couldn't have happened at a better time. MVTV was expanding into this area at precisely the time that the project came up and was approved. So it's been a win-win for both.
Just being used is all it really needs to be successful. I just hope a lot of the people that have no interest in broadband now start to understand some of the value. You know, if we can demonstrate to the other counties how important it is to broadband, it's just going to benefit all of Minnesota.
And with us now to talk about broadband in rural America are a couple of folks who have a lot of experience in the area. With me, first of all, is Jane Leonard, and Jane is the director, or I should say the grants administrator with the Office of Broadband at the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Security. Jane, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And also with us is Kevin Byer. Kevin is the CEO of Acera, which is a cooperative, works in the area of telephone, and you've also got a lot of experience in broadband.
We do.
Great. So thanks for joining us. And I know when we were discussing there, you know, during that piece, one of the issues that comes up a lot of times is what is broadband? And even that seems to be a huge issue, just the definition. For a lot of folks I talk to, they say, well, it either means what I have is good enough or not good enough, right? Is that kind of where we are?
I think that's a great basic definition, and broadband is really not a technology. It's a speed, a capacity. You know, Kevin is the expert given the kind of work that Federated and others are doing, and I think that people think that broadband is a technology itself, but it's really capacity, a certain capacity for internet access and the speeds that reach certain levels. So.
Yeah, and broadband, I think it's easier for people to understand. Capacity and speed are the same thing for the general public. And there are many definitions, like at the federal level, you'll hear 10.1 is good for rural.
Meaning 10.1 meg?
No, 10 meg down, 1 meg up.
Okay.
Is good for rural, and they do metro as 25 meg down, 3 meg up, and they have different standards. But at the end of the day, the federal government is saying, the funding to help rural high-cost areas, we're only going to fund it at 10.1. At the end of the day, we probably want them to have higher speeds than that, but we can only fund networks up to that. So the definition most people work from today now are 25.3 because that's really the higher level the feds have set. And at the state of Minnesota, they're somewhere between 10 and 20 for download and 5 to 10 up. Yeah. So there's multiple definitions, which makes it difficult to understand what that means.
And when you talk about up and down, you're talking about upload and download speeds, which can, you know, for some people, depending on their needs or depending on the business, they may care a lot about having those upload and download speeds comparable, or they can accept a big difference, right?
Yeah, I think you're talking about the synchronicity of it. So exactly for telemedicine, perhaps, you might need faster speeds up, or if you're a creator in the internet economy and you need to be pushing lots of video or designs or whatever up, you need higher speeds on that upload. So
right, but when the internet really came out and most broadband started up, everything was down. It was you were consuming information, you were reading stuff, you were watching videos. Now people are creating that. Businesses are creating things that they need to send up, x-rays. They need to send information on their business, upload into the cloud. They're taking videos of their family that they're uploading to a site for others to watch. A lot more is upload, so people are wanting synchronous, which means the same down and up for speeds, and really that's where we come into in providing fiber networks.
Kevin, I want to talk a little bit about your specific viewing area, because of course we have Pioneer viewers from a very wide area, and the area that where you're talking about where you work is in western Minnesota. Tell us about your service area.
Yeah, basically, or probably the easiest way to define it is we are primarily in Stevens County, Swift County, Big Stone County, and Lackabarro County. We do touch some other counties, but very small pieces of them. But that's our general area, and in our area, we're 100% fiber to the premise for all of our customers.
So an area that's a little more than 100 miles west-northwest of the Twin Cities for people who are not from the area will be one way for them to look at it. And so you're dealing with a lot of rural customers, but I suppose over the last few years, you've seen rural businesses that have really started to say, wow, we really need service that we didn't expect we'd need a few years ago, right?
Very true. We have multiple businesses out here that have decided that they need to connect their different offices wherever they may be, whether they're in the state or outside the state. And especially when they're within our region, they want it on a ringed network. Ring network or self-healing networks have become very important for them because everything they do when their employees show up in the morning is get online. They need their emails. They need to download the information or upload information that is part of the business on a day-to-day basis. If they don't have that connection, they don't have that capacity or speed that they need, they can't do their job. So these businesses have been more and more saying, connect me to a high-speed broadband connection.
Yeah. And Jane, in your work with the state of Minnesota, is this the sort of thing that you're hearing from a lot of different areas? Is this a fairly common sort of scenario, what Kevin has described?
It's very common, and I think as our Lieutenant Governor has said many times, broadband is not just nice; it's a necessity for economic growth. It's a necessity for education and healthcare, and particularly in rural areas. I think because of the distance, the remoteness, perhaps. But we're trying to work towards border-to-border broadband in Minnesota, and that's what the Office of Broadband Development is doing, and the Governor's Task Force on Broadband as well.
So tell us about the Governor's Task Force, because I know late 2015, early 2016, there have been some developments there, some recommendations. Tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah, every year the task force puts out an annual report, and this year happened to be one in which the task force made recommendations for new speed goals and also some recommendations on the grant program that Minnesota has. And so, as Kevin mentioned before, the FCC had set the speed goals for the country at 25.3. The task force is recommending that moving forward in terms of trying to reach that border-to-border in Minnesota by 2022. With also a kind of proviso that by 2026, the recommendation would be at least one provider to every household that can reach 100 down and 20 megabits up. So, so it's jumping around quite a bit, and I guess the bottom line is that the task force has made these recommendations, but it still needs to go to the legislature, which is meeting starting next month here in Minnesota. And they are really the ultimate arbitrators of the speed goals and the decisions on the grant program and the statutes that govern this work.
But I think it's important to note in that the state, when you build any network with grant funds, that has to meet the 100 meg.
It needs to be scalable up to 100 meg, right? The grants are for areas that are either unserved or underserved. So the speed goal represents the threshold at which people are considered served. And so anything under 10.5 at this point for the last two grant rounds was considered underserved. And during the first round, and we're getting a little geeky here, but during the first round, the FCC minimum was 4.1. And so there was quite a wider margin between the underserved and the state speed goal. And now with the second round that just went out in November of 2015, that was on the 25.3 as kind of the bottom line, and the 10.5 being the served line. So, sure. So those are some of the things that the legislature will have to take into consideration of how they're going to set that, because I mean even the maps change then with all of that, and I know we were talking about that a little bit before we came on, and so even though you've got a map of a certain point in time, and our maps right now are good as of February of 2015, so new maps will be coming out yet this year. That can change too with the speed goals being changed.
Well, and the maps, if you go to a website and you're looking at average broadband speeds from an area, again, it's a constantly moving target. You can look at a particular spot and you can zoom into your area of the state and say, oh, well, this looks like I'm supposed to have this speed, but depending on where you live, whether you're in the town or whether you're in the township next door, those things could be very, very different.
It can vary, definitely. Yeah.
And when you're asked to provide data for those maps, you're asked to provide what can you do? What can you offer customers in this area, and who can you touch? Doesn't mean that customer is actually taking your service. They may be taking service from somebody else, or they may be in one of those areas where I can provide it to most people in this area, but I can't provide it to all, but I got to give information by census block or census tract, which doesn't say individual address. The state's been very good, though, at when they took over mapping and the grant program. If somebody says, all right, we're getting a grant in this area and what's on that map isn't accurate, the state's been very good at checking that out to verify.
Sure. And if you're a consumer or you're a business and you're looking at a particular location, it can be confusing as well, because you may, in any given county, you may have one part of the county where, oh, it looks like the speeds are really high here, and then suddenly you cross a line and you're not sure why that line's there, and you're on the other side of the line, you say, wait a minute, well, how come it's good here and not good here? So for the consumer, this must get to be very confusing.
Yeah, and I think that brings up another point about economic growth and, household choices that, as people buy houses, as they decide where to operate their business, that's one of the questions that people should be asking is, what kind of internet access do I have here, depending on the need that that household or the business might have. And I think that's why communities are so actively pursuing internet access as one of the major drivers of economic growth, right there with sewer and water and power, and now we've got high-speed internet.
And I think those boundaries get really confusing because, well, for the telephone industry, they were set up in the 20s, 30s, 40s when those boundaries were determined, and they were not determined by county boundaries. They were not determined by census blocks back then. It was a geographic area that said nobody would serve it, so that becomes a telephone exchange. And then you got cable TV, which also offers broadband. They're only in the town and only within the town limits. So, when you're trying to make a square, it doesn't fit within a square very easy at all.
No, it doesn't. And I think you make an interesting point about understanding where you are, because people may make assumptions, on one side or the other in terms of what the speed is. They may say, oh, well, what is it in this township or what is it in this county? And again, place to place. So if you're looking at locating a business or buying a home, it really comes down to getting very specific information about what the speeds are now, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the questions that you want to ask as a, if you're looking for real estate or looking to expand your business or locate one. Yeah.
And this is the sort of thing where, for economic development people, and I know you've been in this for a long time working on economic development with folks, this is the sort of thing that wasn't on the radar screen of a lot of rural economic development people even 5 years ago, right? But now,
right.
Suddenly they're running into a lot of people who say, site selection, what's my speed, upload, download, who's the provider? They really want that information.
Yeah, I've talked to a number of our regional representatives at the Department of Employment and Economic Development, and they tell me all the time that their data centers going up. I mean, obviously a data center needs great access, but they also need power and they need water, and other businesses too, as Kevin pointed out earlier, are looking at those things as just a must-have. And so in terms of economic development, definitely a town needs to look at those kinds of priorities.
And those are things we actually deal with. Those are customers that actually come our way and said, all right, we want to be in this community, or we want to expand in this community, but they don't ask if you're at 25.3. They come in the door and ask, I got a minimum 50 or 100 meg. Can you go to a gig? That is the question businesses now ask you. I need 50 or 100, but can you go to a gig? Because if you can't go to a gig, I'm going to outgrow that need. In too near a future, it's going to be a problem for me. So I need to know your network can handle that.
Yeah, so it becomes something that's difficult for some people to understand because they're used to thinking about the physical expansion of a business. And can you add onto the building? Can you add onto the parking lot? And now it's this other piece that you can't really see.
A little mysterious, but
but the expansion capacity is just as important.
Yeah, it is. Definitely.
What about some generational things here? Because it strikes me that for a lot of millennials and what we're reading about millennials and millennial choices for where they live or where they work, for a lot of them it's, I want to find a community that's interesting, I want to find a community that has the amenities, and then I will take my entrepreneurial work with me there. So is that another sort of is there a generational shift in attitudes we're seeing that's significant about broadband and expectations?
Well, I think so, because more and more businesses also have the work from home. They're fine with their employees working from home as long as they can have a broadband connection that makes them productive. That's what we hear. It has to make them productive. It can't be slowing them down, so they'd be much more productive in the office because of that connection. So people are then looking at communities or homes, specific homes, saying, if that's not connected, I can't buy that house because I want to work from home part of the time and I can't do it unless that happens. Those are questions we get often at this point, which makes a big difference. Like you say, years ago, a few years ago, nobody cared.
Well, and not only care, but I think there's also some attention in the last few years about, in the broader sense, where the United States stands on a number of criteria, whether it's average number of homes connected or average speed per home or uploaded, downloaded. When you look at those criteria, there was a time when the United States was much higher on some of those international lists than it is now, right? So on a world stage, there are also issues, true?
Yeah, and I think that changes again as the speed needs change. And I think Minnesota is what, like, depending on what scale you're looking at, you know, maybe like number 21 or within the country. But as a country, yeah, I think we're maybe middle of the pack. That's what I've seen most recently. So it's, and that brings up another point, I think, for people, especially people who are concerned about community and economic development issues, is that this is not going to stop. This is something that you always have to be working on, which is why it's great to have a economic development strategy that includes this always, because it's just going to keep changing and you have to adjust to it. We're hoping to have some conversations, for example, with some of the planning folks in the state, so that on everybody's comprehensive use plan, for example, broadband is one of those aspects of that comprehensive plan. So every 10 years or so, you know, people have to make sure that that's updated.
So let's look ahead a little bit. I know it's tough to take out the crystal ball on these issues because there are so many changes and they're happening so fast, but legislative session's a couple months away, grants are out there, stuff's going on. What can we expect in the next, let's just say, year to 2 years on these issues? Jane, I'll start with you.
Okay, well, I'll put on my, I'll look in the crystal ball. I think our vision would be that, the grant program comes through again, that we get somewhere between 35 and 100 million. That's kind of the bottom to the top right now in terms of what's been discussed in the legislature so far. But anything can happen, and so we wait until the end of the session to see what happens. I think the speed goals will likely change. It's really uncertain at this point what that might be. Next week, I think Kevin and I are both going to be at the broadband conference. And you'll probably hear a lot of prognostication there. But I think, some good ideas about how to move the state forward. So,
it's clear from a network provider side that the network is going to be more and more built with fiber to the premise, to each building, and where it's just too expensive to take fiber to every building, you're going to see fiber to some of the buildings, and then on those buildings you're going to see antennas that will provide wireless, but it needs to get much, much closer than tower sites do today to the population.
Sure.
Because as you divide that up, the more and more antennas you have, the more and more you offload to a smaller group of people per antenna that's connected with a fiber. So that'll provide more and more bandwidth and usage.
Yeah, particularly with the idea that wireless has speeds that are less generally than you're going to find with the fiber, so there's a qualitative difference there. In the last minute or so that we have, what about more information if people want to go and find out more about broadband? I know, Jane, there's some state resources available?
Definitely, yes. Our office, the website, which has a long URL, but if you just Google the Minnesota Office of Broadband Development, you can find all sorts of resources, including that report that I mentioned from the Governor's Task Force. So that's a great starting point. And our office, just in general, give us a call, email. We are very responsive and wanting to help. So.
And Kevin, it's with local providers as well. I mean,
for
your
you can certainly call and ask us, and we'll help you out in our region anyway.
Sure,
but,
sure. In the ACIRA region.
There you go.
Okay, and ACIRA is ACIRA, right?
You got it.
Got it. Good. Jane, Kevin, thank you very much for being with us.
You're welcome.
That's all we have for this week on The Compass. Of course, as you think about broadband or other issues, be sure to go to our website, pioneer.org. If you missed any of this program or any other program on the Pioneer lineup, you can catch it all there online at pioneer.org. Thank you for watching, and join us again next week on Compass.